I've had a wonderful day, and I hope you have too. I started the day, I wasn't with you this morning, because I had a meeting at the CIA with the Inspector General for the intelligence community. So that's a relatively new statutory position within the last decade, and the job of the Inspector General is to oversee the entire intelligence community and make sure they're not exceeding their authority. So the idea of it is to avoid government excesses and intrusions on the rights of the individual, including overbearing surveillance on the individual or invasions of the individual's privacy. Then I had the opportunity this afternoon and the pleasure to moderate the panel on big data and convene all those experts together and get them to talk with you, and you to ask them questions, which was really wonderful as well. So my day is being capped by the wonderful pleasure and privilege to introduce Peter Hustinx to you. And you're going to have to bear with me because he has done a lot of things. So I have a few things to say about that. It's going to take me a little bit. His current position is he is the European Data Protection Supervisor since January 2004. And he was appointed by a joint decision of the European Parliament and of the European Council, so one of the things that they were all able to agree upon relatively speedily, on 22 December 2003, and then he was reappointed on January 14, 2009 for a second term of 5 years, so he is now in that second term. The European Data Protection Supervisor is entrusted with monitoring and applying the provisions of the EC Data Protection Directive, which goes by the informal name of number 45/2001, a regulation number 45/2001, but it's the EU Data Protection Directive, applied to the processing of personal data, and the European Data Protection Supervisor oversees that with regard to personal data processing carried out by the EU, European Union institutions and bodies. He is also responsible for advising those EU institutions, all of them, and bodies, all of them, on all matters concerning the processing of personal data. And when he's not doing all those other things, he has a duty to cooperate with national and supervisory authorities. So in the EU member states, all of the national level data protection authorities and supervisory bodies that are established under the former, quote, third pillar of the European Union, and to provide guidance and leadership to them. Peter Hustinx has been closely involved in the development of data protection legislation from the start, both at the national and at the international level. So let me say that again. Peter Hustinx has been closely involved in the development of data protection legislation from the start, both at the national and at international level. Before entering his current office as European Data Protection Supervisor, he was president of the Dutch Data Protection Authority for a period of more than 12 years. He received law degrees, I'm going to murder this, my Dutch is terrible, at the University of Nijmegen. How'd I do? Not too bad, okay, well, just pass right over that, in 1970, and then at the University of Michigan Law School in Ann Arbor, Michigan, in 1971, hence his excellent command of English. In 1971, then following receipt of his degrees, he joined the Dutch Ministry of Justice and worked in the field of constitutional and criminal law and in the preparation of legislation. As a member of the Committee of Experts on Data Protection of the Council of Europe, he took part in the preparation of the famous, to anyone in the privacy field, the famous 1981 Convention on Data Protection, and of the several recommendations in that field. From 1985 to 98, he was the chairman of that committee. In 1991, he was appointed, and then in 1997, reappointed. Are you getting the impression that people like this fellow and think he's effective at what he does? Okay, so in 1991, he was appointed, and then in 97, reappointed as president of the Dutch Data Protection Authority. And in September 2001, he continued, this is the third time around, as the president of the Data Protection Authority that was established by a new act, Data Protection Act, that was enacted in the Netherlands. In 2003, he was reappointed for a third term of 6 years. In 1994, he never goes on holiday. In 1994, He was chairman of the International Conference of Data Protection Commissioners, and many of us have participated in those. I'm sure Peter, as I do, is now a very big international meeting held in a different capital every year. A country steps forward to host it. In fact, I think this year is the 35th International Data Protection Commissioners Conference. But I remember well when it was just a gathering of 12 European men who would treat themselves to a very fine dinner and smoke cigars. I was not invited, but I remember that when Hans-Peter Gassmann and others would attend that dinner. But he was the chairman of that conference in '94. And then from 1996 until 2000, he was the chairman of the Article 29 Working Party, which had been established under the EU directive. From 1998 until 2001, he was chairman of the Appeals Committee of the Joint Supervisory Board of Europol. That was established under Article 24 of the Europol Convention. And then from 2002 until 2009, he was chairman of the Commission for the Control of Interpol's Files. And maybe he'll tell us where all the bodies are buried. I don't know. Kind of interesting. Since 1996, he has also, in his spare time, been deputy judge in the Court of Appeals in Amsterdam. All right, so on a personal note, I have known Peter since 1988. I started working at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development in Paris in 1998. It was the year right after I graduated from first grade, and I went there. And I was brought in to work on privacy, among other subjects. And I had the opportunity then to work with the early pioneers, and truly the word is pioneers, as I said earlier, started data protection legislation from the start. The pioneers who charted the privacy terrain, including Peter. And Peter has been, throughout the years, a personal role model for me. I admire, first of all, and I remember very well, at the OECD meetings. I admired his collegial and inclusive style, and also his expertise, national and international, as I told you, and commitment to these issues and to making the world a better place. As Deb Peel said, this is the Brandeis Award. You've already heard some history of Brandeis, and I won't go into too much of Brandeis' biography, which could occupy us right until midnight as well. But Brandeis, there are two things. It's very fitting that Peter is receiving the Brandeis Award. Brandeis is known for having written the seminal article in the privacy field called The Right to Privacy, which is viewed widely as the launch of the modern era of privacy. So he wrote that. And he also, so we all stand on the shoulders of giants, including Brandeis. And Brandeis was deeply committed, had a deep faith in the free, informed public, which remains a beacon of democracy, and privacy itself is essential to autonomy, self-determination, and enjoyment of the democratic construct. So in that spirit, Peter, I invite you to come up, please, and receive this award.
Fantastic. I'm deeply moved and honored by this big gesture. Deborah, for speaking up. You did a nice job and documentation on the web, adding your personal perspective. Other Deborah, for organizing this whole event in which we're all together in such an enjoyable way. Let me start there and recognize the very important work of patients' rights and how important this international summit is and is going to be if you are involved more and more international influence. But I am deeply moved by this gesture of being associated with Louis Brandeis, and that's an humbling experience. There are a number of reasons why I find this so meaningful. And I touched on this briefly this morning, But the truth is that, and you've heard that, when I came to the United States in 1970, it was indeed here that I was exposed to the first very fresh pioneering thinking on privacy in data protection and data protection. It was at Brown University, a summer school, summer course for all young lawyers, then working at law schools all over the country. And I continued at Michigan, doing some work in computers and the law, and actually very pioneering. But I came to the US with an idea of doing some research on the role of judges in the development of the law, about perhaps social engineering done by judges, about what you might say the idea of a living constitution, about living law and how you could do this in a responsible way. So you can imagine that linking privacy to Louis Brandeis, and then in my person in the form of this prize, is a very meaningful experience. I recently reread the famous article, which was not only Brandeis, it was Warren and Brandeis in the Harvard Law Review, but not only in the substance, but also the way they were making their pitch. You could see why this article has been so influential, because it is really a model in terms of how you convince your audience, your readers in the direction where you want. And Brandeis' dissent in Olmsted is actually of the very same kind. Now, the research in social engineering of judges didn't get very far, but I came back to the Netherlands, and it was our first year of being married. So within a week after the wedding, we were in New York on our way to Michigan, and so this was a joint experience, and I'm so pleased that my beloved wife is here, Beatrice. But I came home in The Hague with multiple impressions, and among which also this idea of privacy and informatics to be developed. And I mentioned this to the newly appointed Minister of Justice, who, coincidence, used to be my professor of criminal law. And he said, if that's the case, if you are a specialist in privacy, you should be doing this for us. So I was sent to Strasbourg to do further work on this. And so the irony is that I came across this new concept in this country, and I've been following the events here fairly closely, but I've been through various phases. First, the pioneering phase, fairly fair to say this was really, really pioneering, in the spirit of pioneers. You're moving west, discovering new frontiers. We were discovering new frontiers and building legal constructs to work with this, which then was formed into a convention. And then many of us continued to advise on national legislation. And those of you who have had the impression that I've done only privacy in life, I should add, by way of example, that I've done a fair bit of medical law and genetic experiments and whatever not things, but just on the way. But national law preparing national privacy acts. This was a period of deregulation, so this happened in 3 versions, and then the simplest version finally made it. And then the period of European law developing on this. And again, I was fortunate to play a role there. Being then, becoming a full-timer in national regulator, data protection authority, and now finally at the European level doing a 4th or a 5th round of renewal thinking about this at a time where everything is now connected. And if ever something is relevant, I mean, we have so much evidence around us. And so it will take continued creativity, it will take persuasion, good skills in writing of the kind Brandeis demonstrated in his pieces, but it also takes the courage to do social engineering, to move frontiers, to come to agreements, to build bridges, and to make this performant in a way that we can live free, not constrained by undue restrictions, but can benefit from all the new possibilities, but in ways that safeguards are built in privacy by design or other ways, to the benefit of health data, stakeholders, and all of us, because we all have our lives and different corners and different interests. And it is so fascinating to be part of this. And I will share this. It will be in my office. One of my heads of staff is here to be part of this experience. We've been doing some useful work so far, aside from the conference, and we'll be doing more tomorrow and Friday. But I'll share this with my team and pass on the spirit. And thank you, Deborah. Thank you, Deborah, for making this possible. I'm deeply pleased. Thank you very much.
What an amazing evening. Thank you so much, Peter. Thank you so much, Mark, for being willing to accept these awards. We could not think of two more deserving, special people, and both of you are my heroes and heroes of many people in the room. So thank you. Thank you very much.